My name is Olivia, but people call me Ollie, and I'm 61 years old. Yesterday, I buried the love of my life, my husband Victor. And today, my own daughter looked me in the eye and told me I was nothing. You're not getting a single cent of my money. Nothing, Rebecca screamed, her voice slicing through the silence of our living room. I was still in my black dress, clutching my handbag and a damp handkerchief, my makeup smudged from hours of tears. Rebecca held the will in her hands like a trophy. It's all mine now, Mother. Every last dollar. The house, the accounts, the business. You're irrelevant. Arthur, Victor's lawyer, stood awkwardly in the corner. He had just read the will aloud, his voice steady, but his eyes told me something wasn't right. Something more was hidden in those pages. Before I could speak, Rebecca shoved me toward the door. The slam echoed like a death sentence. I stepped outside, rain falling cold against my face, soaking into my funeral clothes. 40 years of memories shut away behind that door. Then Arthur came running after me, a folder under his arm. Mrs. Olivia, please wait, he whispered, glancing back toward the house. Your husband planned for this. Meet me at my office. I froze. My grief was still raw, but in that moment, a flicker of something else cut through the pain, hope. What would you have done, standing there in the rain? Before I tell you about the day everything collapsed, I need to take you back to what life was like before Victor's death. For 40 years, he and I built a rhythm together, one of those quiet, ordinary lives that don't look like much from the outside, but to me, it was everything. We weren't glamorous, we weren't reckless, but we had stability, and in that stability, I always felt safe. Our mornings were my favorite part. Victor was always the first one up. I'd hear the kettle boil, the sound of the spoons clinking against porcelain. He would pour our coffee into the same 2 mugs we'd used for decades. His had a tiny crack near the handle. Mine had faded roses painted across it. He never once suggested replacing them. Why would we, he used to say. They've lasted as long as we have. We'd sit at the small table by the kitchen window, sunlight creeping through the curtains, and he'd read the paper aloud to me. Not the whole thing, just the parts he knew would make me laugh or roll my eyes. It was in those little moments I understood what marriage meant. Not fireworks, not grand gestures, but showing up every morning, every year with the same devotion. Sundays were sacred in our house. No matter how busy life became, we always had Sunday dinner as a family. Rebecca would come over, often with some story about work or her latest project. Back then, she still let us in, still sat at the table with us, eating roast chicken or shepherd's pie, complaining about her boss. We'd laugh, we'd tease her gently, and she'd always kiss me goodbye before heading back to her own apartment. Those dinners were where I still felt like we were whole. Victor was a meticulous man. He believed in order, in systems. Our filing cabinet was a fortress of labeled folders, tax records, property deeds, investment papers, even receipts for appliances we'd replaced years ago. But the one thing he guarded most carefully was a leather folder he kept locked in his desk drawer. He never said much about it, only that it contained the important things. I respected his privacy, but I knew whatever was inside mattered deeply to him. Sometimes, when I dusted his desk, I'd pause with my hand on that drawer, tempted to peek, but I never did. He told me once, "Ollie, if you ever truly need it, you'll know." His words stayed with me, though at the time I didn't understand why. Our community was small, the kind where people noticed if you missed church 2 Sundays in a row. I was part of the gardening club, always trying to coax roses to bloom earlier than they should. Twice a year, I baked lemon drizzle cake for the church fundraiser, and people would fight for the last slice. My closest friends and I sometimes gathered at the local cafe to discuss retirement plans, pensions, or what we'd do if we suddenly won the lottery. Those conversations were lighthearted, but I see now how different my perspective was from Rebecca's. For me, security meant enough to live comfortably. For her, it meant more, always more. I wasn't just a homemaker. For 20 years, I worked part-time at the library. I loved the smell of old books, the quiet atmosphere, and the joy of helping someone find exactly the novel or history text they were searching for. Victor would tease me, saying I was the only woman he knew who would come home with her hands smelling of dust and ink instead of perfume. That job gave me pride, independence, and friendships outside of my marriage. It reminded me I was more than Victor's wife, more than Rebecca's mother. My relationship with Rebecca, oh, how I wish I could freeze her at 12 years old. She was bright, curious, endlessly chatty. We would bake cookies together, make Christmas ornaments, and she'd sneak into our bed on stormy nights. But as she grew, the softness in her shifted into something sharper. She wanted to be in control, to prove she didn't need anyone. I saw it in the way she rejected hand-me-down furniture, the way she wrinkled her nose when I offered to buy her groceries as a young adult. She used to say, "Mum, I don't want to live like you and Dad. I want my own empire." At first, I thought it was youthful ambition. Looking back, I wonder if it was the seed of something darker. Victor noticed too. He rarely criticized her, but one evening after Rebecca had left, he looked at me with a heaviness in his eyes and said, "I worry she's not ready for responsibility. She wants the rewards without the weight that comes with them." I brushed it off at the time, thinking he was being overprotective, but those words have haunted me ever since. There was one night, about 6 months before he died, that I can't shake. Victor insisted we cancel dinner plans and go see Arthur, our lawyer. It was unusual because Rebecca wasn't invited, and Victor was adamant about that. "Just us," he'd said. We sat in Arthur's office for nearly 2 hours. I remember the solemn tone, the way Victor leaned across the desk, asking Arthur to make specific arrangements. I wasn't given every detail, but I left with a strange unease. When we got home, Victor placed a sealed envelope inside that leather folder and told me, "Don't open this unless you have no other choice." His words chilled me, though he smiled as if to soften the weight of them. That envelope became another symbol of something I couldn't name at the time, a door locked until the moment destiny forced it open. As Rebecca entered her 30s, the distance grew. She stopped coming to Sunday dinners as often, always with an excuse: too busy, too important. When she did come, she'd arrive with a new handbag or necklace, showing off brands I'd only seen in magazines. I remember once setting down a homemade pie and hearing her mutter, "Mum, nobody eats this stuff anymore, you know. Everyone orders out." It stung, not because of the words themselves, but because of the casual dismissal of everything I'd built our family traditions upon. Her appetite for expensive things seemed insatiable. She swapped her modest apartment for a flashy flat in the city, filled her Instagram with luxury holidays and champagne brunches. The more she gained, the less she seemed to need us. Or perhaps she thought needing us would make her look weak. By the time Victor fell ill, I already sensed the fracture was deep. We were holding on to her with fingertips, while she sprinted towards something we couldn't even recognize. That's the life I had before it all broke apart. A steady marriage, a home filled with small rituals, a daughter slipping further away with every diamond she wore. And that leather folder in Victor's desk, holding secrets I didn't yet understand, waiting like a quiet shadow for its moment to matter. The day of Victor's funeral is a blur in my memory, but some images are burned so deeply I'll never shake them. The church was filled with dark coats, black dresses, and expensive umbrellas dripping rainwater onto the stone floor. Old colleagues of Victor's came, men with polished shoes and wives draped in pearls. Neighbors brought flowers, though I couldn't tell you who carried what. I sat at the front, hands locked around a damp handkerchief, staring at the coffin as if it weren't real. My body felt heavy, as though grief had turned me to stone. Rebecca was there, of course, wearing a designer black dress that hugged her figure, her face painted without a smudge. Not a single tear stained her cheeks. She hugged people, accepted condolences with a smile that didn't belong at a funeral. I tried not to notice, but even in that moment, something about her composure unsettled me. After the burial, people gathered back at the house. Our home looked strange, filled with so many well-dressed mourners, laughter bubbling from the dining room where champagne was being poured. I sat quietly in the living room, my heart aching, until Arthur, our lawyer, asked us all to sit. The time had come for the will. His voice was calm, professional, but when he reached the words, "Victor leaves his entire estate to Rebecca," I felt my chest cave in. Entire estate. The words echoed in my ears. The house, the money, the investments, all placed into her hands with a single sentence. I stared at Rebecca, waiting for some sign of humility, but instead she smiled. Smiled. A smirk stretched across her face, as though she'd just won a game. She leaned back in her chair, eyes glittering with triumph. "Mum," she said, her tone dripping with disdain, "did you really think he'd leave it to you? You've lived off Dad your whole life like some parasite. Well, that time is over. It's mine now." The cruelty in her voice sliced deeper than the news itself. My own daughter, standing over my grief, calling me a parasite. My hand shook so violently I had to set down my teacup before it shattered. "You have 24 hours to leave," she continued, her voice rising. "This is my house now, and you? You're nothing here." "Nothing," gasps whispered around the room. Even Arthur shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "Rebecca," he said quietly, "you did read the entire will, didn't you?" Her head snapped toward him. "Of course I did." "Why?" Arthur's eyes flicked toward me, then back at her. "Nothing. Just, sometimes people miss details." His words hung in the air, delicate but weighted, like a warning she refused to hear. Rebecca's lip curled. "Don't play games with me. The money's mine. The house is mine. She jabbed her finger at me, is out." Before I could reply, she grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the door. My body stumbled, my heels slipping on the hardwood. The slam that followed rang through the house like a gunshot. I stepped into the rain, stunned. Just hours earlier, I had laid Victor to rest. Now I was being cast out of the home we built together over 40 years. I looked up at the windows, the curtains we'd chosen together, the garden Victor had tended so lovingly, and it all felt like it was dissolving, turning to ash. The rain soaked into my black dress, clinging to me, but I didn't care. The cold of it was nothing compared to the ice spreading through my chest. My daughter had chosen greed over family, cruelty over compassion. Then, suddenly, footsteps pounded behind me. Arthur's voice cut through the rain. "Mrs. Olivia, Ollie, please wait." He caught up, clutching a folder to his chest, his face pale but intent. He lowered his voice. "Your husband planned for this. Meet me at my office." "There's something you need to see." I froze on the pavement, my body trembling. My grief was raw, but his words sparked something else inside me. A flicker. A question. Perhaps even hope. Arthur's office was nothing like Victor's study. Where Victor kept his space warm with wood panels and framed photographs, Arthur's office was clinical. Tall filing cabinets, a polished mahogany desk, and stacks of legal folders that smelled faintly of paper and dust. I sat stiffly in the leather chair across from him, my black funeral dress still clinging damp against my skin from the rain. I felt raw, exposed, like someone had peeled the last layer of protection from me. Arthur closed the blinds before speaking. His voice lowered, as if even the shadows might overhear. "Ollie, Victor was meticulous. You know that better than anyone." I nodded faintly. Meticulous was an understatement. Victor kept files on everything, bank statements organized by year, warranties carefully clipped, receipts tucked in envelopes. I had teased him for decades about his obsession with order. Now, sitting in Arthur's office, I realized it hadn't been obsession at all. It had been preparation. Arthur slid a folder across the desk. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a document, an amendment to the will, dated just 6 months ago. In the event that Rebecca demonstrates cruelty or disrespect toward her mother during the period of mourning, Arthur read aloud, "The inheritance shall immediately and irrevocably revert to Olivia Whitmore." My heart stopped. Victor had seen this coming. Arthur's gaze was steady on me. Rebecca's words today, her behavior, it was exactly what he feared. I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to steady my breathing. But how do we prove it? Arthur reached for a small device in his drawer. A recorder. He pressed play. Rebecca's voice crackled out, clear and venomous. "You're not getting a single cent of my money. Nothing. This is my house now, and you're nothing." The sound of her cruelty filled the room, louder than it had been in that moment. Hearing it again felt like reopening a wound. Arthur paused the tape. "That alone is evidence." Victor instructed me to record the will reading, just in case. A wave of grief and awe washed over me. My husband had thought of everything. Even in his final months, he was planning not for himself, but for me. Arthur leaned back. But that's not all. Victor left something else. He reached into a locked drawer and set a familiar object on the desk. My breath caught. A leather folder. The same one Victor had always kept locked in his desk at home. I had never seen it open. Arthur tapped it gently. He told me you'd know when to open this. I believe we're close to that moment. But not yet. I reached for it instinctively, but Arthur stopped me with a raised hand. Patience, Ollie. If we open this too soon, Rebecca will find a way to twist it. Victor wanted her to reveal herself fully. I sank back into the chair, torn between despair and a flicker of something dangerously close to hope. Justice. Could it be possible? The next days were a strange blur of humiliation and quiet defiance. Rebecca had given me 24 hours to leave. I packed my bags in silence, folding clothes into suitcases as though I were some unwelcome guest in my own home. Every photograph I touched felt like it was burning my fingertips. I left most of them behind. They didn't belong to me anymore. A friend from my gardening club, Janice, offered me her spare room. I accepted with a quiet gratitude, my cheeks hot with shame. To be 61 years old, homeless in the rain, cast aside by the child I raised, it was a humiliation no words could capture. From Janice's house, I watched Rebecca's arrogance spread like wildfire through the community. Word traveled quickly. She was seen on shopping sprees at luxury boutiques, laughing with friends while wearing new diamond bracelets. She dismissed condolences from neighbors with a flip of her hair, as if Victor's death were nothing more than an inconvenience she'd already outgrown. At church, I overheard whispers. Poor Ollie, and so soon after Victor's funeral too. Did you see Rebecca's car? A brand new Jaguar, just days after the will reading. The pity in their voices stung, but it was the scorn directed at Rebecca that cut deeper. People were beginning to see her for who she truly was. I remembered Victor's words one evening over dinner, months ago. He had spoken quietly, almost to himself. I worry she's not ready for responsibility. Wealth is a test of character, Ollie. And I fear Rebecca will fail. At the time, I had brushed it off, believing in our daughter despite her sharp tongue and restless ambition. But now, every memory of her dismissive remarks, every cold glance, every complaint about tradition came rushing back. She had been telling us who she was all along. We just hadn't wanted to listen. Arthur visited me often in those first weeks, always discreet, always carrying folders under his arm. He never said much in public, but behind closed doors he assured me he was collecting everything: statements from neighbors, records of Rebecca's lavish spending, even testimonies of her cruelty. She's making it easy for us, he said one evening, spreading receipts across the table at Janice's house. All we have to do is wait. She believes she's untouchable, but Victor knew her arrogance would undo her. I nodded, though my chest still ached. Part of me still grieved the daughter I thought I had. Another part of me burned with quiet resolve. In the weeks that followed, Rebecca paraded her victory everywhere she went. At luncheons, she boasted about her inheritance, laughing that she had finally taken the reins from her parents. At the country club, she sneered at old family friends who dared suggest she was moving too fast. And all the while, Arthur quietly built the case. He never pushed me to open the leather folder, though its presence haunted me. At night, I dreamt of it sitting in Arthur's desk, sealed and waiting, like a beating heart beneath the wood. Victor had left me with more than grief. He had left me with instructions, with a plan, with a chance to reclaim not just the estate, but the dignity Rebecca had stolen. All I had to do was wait. And watch her fall. Arthur summoned me back to his office on a gray Tuesday morning. The rain streaked across his window panes, just as it had the day Victor was buried. The sound was oddly comforting, like a rhythm that followed me through every stage of grief and discovery. He placed a thick folder on the desk. Ollie, it's time you saw this. Inside were rows of bank documents, trust agreements, and signatures in Victor's familiar, steady handwriting. Arthur's voice was calm but deliberate. Victor anticipated everything. Rebecca may believe she inherited the entire estate, but the truth is far more complicated. Large portions of his assets, most of them in fact, were moved into irrevocable trusts. And those trusts require two signatures, Rebecca's and yours. I blinked at him, stunned. Mine? Yes, Arthur said, leaning forward. Victor designed it this way deliberately. Rebecca cannot access the majority of his fortune without your countersignature. Without your consent, she can't touch a cent of it. She may think she owns $300 million, but in reality, she controls far less. I felt my heart stutter. For weeks, I had been walking around like a ghost, stripped of everything. But now, I understood. Victor hadn't abandoned me. He had protected me. Arthur slid another paper across the desk, a note in Victor's handwriting. Tests of character determined true heirs. The words felt like a whisper from the grave, steadying me, reminding me that I was not powerless. Rebecca discovered the truth soon enough. I wasn't there, but Arthur later described it with restrained amusement. At the bank, Rebecca had stormed in wearing designer heels and an outrageously expensive mink coat, demanding immediate access to the estate funds. When the banker explained politely that authorization required both signatures, she exploded. "What do you mean, her signature?" she shrieked, loud enough that people in the lobby turned to stare. "This is my money. My father left it to me. She has no claim. She's a parasite, a nothing. Don't you dare tell me I need her permission." She slammed her manicured hand on the counter, rattling pens and clipboards. When the banker refused to budge, she hurled insults, her voice echoing against the marble floors. Witnesses whispered. Some even pulled out their phones. Rebecca stormed out of the bank that day, red-faced and humiliated, but her arrogance wouldn't let her stop there. She went to another branch, the same answer. She demanded meetings with higher officials, same answer. Every time, the rules Victor had set in place blocked her. I began hearing the stories, second-hand neighbors gossiping, acquaintances smirking behind their teacups. "Did you hear? Rebecca screaming at the bankers like a child denied candy? $300 million, and she can't even access it? Serves her right." And still she continued spending. Lavish dinners, designer jewelry, new cars. But she was no longer spending from Victor's fortune. She was racking up credit, convinced the money would soon be hers in full. I could almost hear Victor's voice, patient but firm. "Wealth is a test of character, Ollie. Rebecca's arrogance will be her undoing." I saw it clearly now. The delays, the signatures, the hidden trusts, they weren't obstacles. They were traps. Victor had built a cage of silk and gold, and Rebecca was walking straight into it, blinded by greed. The realization left me shaken, torn between sorrow and grim satisfaction. This was my daughter, my flesh and blood. And yet, the more she revealed of herself, the less I recognized her. She had become a stranger draped in Victor's wealth, strutting through the community like a queen, while beneath her feet the ground was already crumbling. That night, back in Janice's spare room, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The humiliation of losing my home, the ache of grief for Victor, the betrayal from Rebecca, they all weighed heavy. But beneath it all was something new, something I had not felt since Victor's passing. Power. Rebecca believed she had won, but she didn't yet own what she thought she did. And one day soon, she would discover just how cleverly Victor had played his final move. Rebecca didn't waste long before turning her fury on me. She showed up at Janice's house one afternoon, unannounced, pulling into the driveway in a gleaming black sports car that I knew had been bought on credit. I opened the door, my heart tightening as I saw her standing there in a red silk dress, diamonds flashing at her ears. The same child I had once braided hair for before school now looked at me like an enemy. "You're sabotaging me," she snapped, marching past me into Janice's hallway. "The banks say I need your signature. Your signature, Mother. You're blocking me on purpose." I tried to steady my voice. "Rebecca, I'm only following the rules your father put in place. This isn't me against you. Don't you dare twist this," she hissed. "You've always been selfish. Always clinging to Dad's coattails, letting him do everything while you played the saintly wife. Well, I won't let you steal from me now." Her words sliced into me, crueler than she realized. I was still grieving, still waking every morning expecting Victor's hand to be there beside me. And yet here she was, my only child, gaslighting me into believing I was the villain. I stood firm. "I won't sign anything until the time is right. And you know what your father wanted, he made that clear." She glared at me, shaking her head in disbelief. "You'll regret this." I'll have lawyers force you out of the way." Then she slammed the door so hard that Janice came rushing from the kitchen, her eyes wide. From that moment, Rebecca became reckless. She sold jewelry, telling anyone who'd listen that she was liquidating assets to fund major investments. She boasted loudly at the salon about a luxury holiday she was planning in Monaco, though everyone knew she hadn't paid her credit card bill in weeks. She even began planning an extravagant party at the house, promising champagne fountains and imported orchids. The whispers started spreading through town. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering near the apples. "Can you believe Rebecca Thornton, throwing money around like water? That poor mother of hers, living with Janice now." Another voice added, "I heard she screamed at the banker last week. Entire lobby heard it. It was humiliating." My friends, my community, they all saw me displaced while Rebecca strutted as though she were untouchable. Some even asked me outright why I tolerated it. At church one Sunday, Helen from the choir leaned over and whispered, "Ollie, why don't you stop her? Everyone can see she's out of control." I swallowed hard, remembering Victor's words, spoken softly during one of our last evenings together. "Wait until she proves herself unworthy. Only then will justice stick." So I waited. Rebecca's arrogance only grew. She began posting photos online herself in designer clothes, sipping cocktails, flashing keys to new cars. The captions were always dripping with superiority. "A new era begins. Building my empire. No parasites allowed." I knew who those words were meant for. The more she posted, the more hollow it rang. Friends who had once envied her now rolled their eyes. Arthur kept reminding me, "Every reckless thing she does strengthens our case. She's proving Victor right with her own actions." Still, it was painful. At night, in Janice's spare bed, I'd scroll through the photos, my chest aching. That was my daughter, my little girl who once cried when she scraped her knee, now flaunting cruelty for the world to see. And then came the threats. She began calling me, sometimes late at night, her voice sharp and cold. "Mother, sign the documents, or I'll bury you in legal fees. You won't survive this fight. I'll see you in court, and you'll come out penniless." The first time, I trembled after hanging up. The second time, I let her words roll past me like waves. By the third, I almost laughed, not out of joy, but out of recognition. Every threat was another nail in the coffin of her own credibility. Arthur confirmed it when I told him, "Let her threaten. Let her rage. The more she shows her true nature, the clearer the evidence becomes." Remember, Victor built safeguards, and I've documented every step. When the time comes, Rebecca's own arrogance will hand you back everything she thinks she owns. But waiting was agony. Packing my life into boxes, living among Janice's floral curtains and spare crockery, while Rebecca paraded around in Victor's suits and ties, it felt like I was the one punished. My hands ached from folding away clothes, from touching framed photos of Victor's smile, his steady presence reduced to memories. Yet beneath it all was a quiet fire growing, grief mixed with indignation. Rebecca thought she was untouchable, but I knew differently. I had Victor's sealed envelope still hidden in Arthur's office, the clause in the will, the recording of her cruelty. She thought she was winning, but she was only weaving the rope with which she would hang herself. And so I waited, not with fear anymore, but with resolve. Because the day was coming when Rebecca's empire of arrogance would collapse, and I would be there to see it fall. The summons came on a Friday evening. Rebecca's voice on the phone was clipped, sharp, commanding. "We're having a family meeting, tomorrow. Noon. At the house." She didn't call it my house, of course. To her, it was hers now, every brick and window. For a moment, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse, to stay away from the place where Victor and I had lived, laughed, and loved for 40 years. But Arthur insisted. "This is it, Ollie. She thinks she's cornered you. What she doesn't know is that she's about to walk straight into Victor's plan." So I went. The house looked the same from the outside, roses blooming along the path, curtains drawn neatly, but stepping inside felt like trespassing into my own life. Rebecca had rearranged everything, family photos gone. My floral cushions replaced with sharp, modern pieces. Even Victor's armchair, the one by the fireplace, had been pushed into a corner as if it offended her. She was waiting in the living room, standing tall in a black suit far too severe for her age, as though trying to mimic authority. Two of her friends hovered in the background, looking smug, as though they had been promised a share in her kingdom. Arthur sat at the table, briefcase before him, face unreadable. Rebecca didn't waste time. "You've been holding back my rightful money," she declared, pointing a polished finger at me. "You've made the banks refuse me, you've interfered with legal matters, and I won't stand for it. Sign the papers today, or face the consequences." Her words rang through the room like accusations in a courtroom. Her friends nodded, satisfied. She believed herself invincible. I sat down slowly, placing my handbag on the table. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of what I carried. Victor's sealed envelope. Untouched. Waiting. Arthur cleared his throat. "Before any accusations are thrown further, I think it's time the full truth was revealed." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "More of your delays, Arthur? Honestly, I should have fired you weeks ago." He ignored her and looked at me. A silent signal. I reached into my bag and drew out the envelope. The paper was worn now from being handled so often, but the wax seal was intact. My husband's initials pressed firmly into the crimson. For a moment, I just stared at it, remembering Victor's steady hands as he locked it away. Rebecca frowned. "What's that?" "Your father's last safeguard," I said softly, and then I slid it across the table to Arthur. Arthur broke the seal, unfolded the letter, and began to read. His voice was steady, echoing slightly in the silent room. "In the event that my daughter, Rebecca Thornton, demonstrates cruelty toward her mother, Olivia Thornton, particularly during the period of mourning, the entirety of my estate shall revert to my wife. This clause is binding and enforceable upon verification, as it is my firm belief that wealth must never be placed in the hands of one who values money over family." The words hung in the air like a sentence passed. Rebecca's face went pale. "That's absurd." "That's not legal. He can't just—" Arthur raised a hand calmly. "It is legal. And it was filed properly. But more importantly, it has been witnessed." He reached into his briefcase and placed a small device on the table. My breath caught. The recording. He pressed play. Rebecca's voice filled the room, sharp, vicious, undeniable. "You're not getting a single cent of my money. Nothing. You lived like a parasite off Dad. You're dead to me." The words I had tried so hard to push from my memory now echoed back, cutting through every corner of the room. When the recording ended, there was silence. Even Rebecca's friends shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between us. I watched my daughter's face drain of color, watched the confidence slip away like sand through her fingers. Arthur folded his hands. "As you can hear, Mrs. Thornton was subjected to cruelty during her mourning. The condition has been met. Legally, the estate reverts to her." Rebecca's lips trembled. For the first time since Victor's funeral, she looked like a child again, frightened, cornered. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Mom, please." I didn't mean it. I was just upset. "You know how grief is." I lashed out. "You can't hold that against me." I stared at her, my heart twisting. For a brief second, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe the child I had held through sleepless nights was still there beneath the cruelty. But then the memories came. The shove out the door. The words, "You're dead to me." The laughter when she called me a parasite. I stood slowly, my hands steady now. "You chose greed over family, Rebecca. You spat on your father's memory the moment the soil on his grave was still wet. And now, you live with that choice." She burst into tears, collapsing into the chair, mascara streaking down her face. Her friends, once so smug, looked horrified, edging toward the door as though they wanted no part in her downfall. Arthur gathered the documents calmly. "The matter is clear. The estate belongs to Mrs. Zimple. Olivia Thornton, effective immediately." Rebecca's sobs filled the room, but I didn't move toward her. I couldn't. My heart was broken enough. To comfort her would be to erase the cruelty she had poured onto me, and Victor had known better. He had known this moment would come, that the only way Rebecca might learn was to face the consequences of her own arrogance. For years, I had been quiet, accommodating, a wife who brewed the morning coffee, a mother who tried to hold her family together. But standing there in my black morning dress, I felt something shift. Unity, justice. The fortune had never truly left me. Victor had placed control in my hands all along. I had only needed to trust him, to trust that truth would rise. Rebecca lifted her tear-streaked face toward me. Please, Mum, give me another chance. I'll change, I swear. I shook my head. Change comes before the consequences, Rebecca. Not after. Her sobs broke again, echoing through the house like the slam of the door that rainy day. Except now, the power had shifted. The house was mine again. The life Victor and I had built was mine to preserve. Arthur packed his briefcase and nodded to me gently. It's done. I walked out of the room, not with rage, not even with relief, but with the quiet strength of a woman who had endured betrayal and still stood tall. Behind me, Rebecca wept, the empire she thought she had built crumbling into dust. And for the first time since Victor's death, I felt him beside me again, not as a ghost of grief, but as a presence of love and protection. His plan had worked. His faith in me had not been misplaced. The confrontation was over, but the lessons of it would last a lifetime. The court proceedings moved faster than I expected. Arthur filed the documents, citing Victor's clause and presenting the recording. The judge, stern but sympathetic, reviewed everything with care. There was no loophole, no way for Rebecca to twist the truth. Within a month, the estate was legally restored to me. The ruling was final. All assets, accounts, and property reverted to Olivia Thornton. Rebecca, once so confident in her imagined wealth, was left with nothing but the debts she had created in her frenzy. Creditors called, demanding repayment for the extravagant parties, the designer clothes, the so-called investments she had bragged about. Her friends, who had clung to her while champagne flowed, evaporated the moment the bills arrived. I didn't feel triumph. Watching my daughter unravel was not a victory, it was a tragedy. The morning after the judgment, Arthur handed me one last envelope. The same wax seal, the same neat handwriting that I knew as well as my own. Victor's final message. I held it carefully, my fingers trembling as I broke the seal. Inside was a single page, written in his familiar bold strokes. Ollie, if you are reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. Do not doubt yourself. You are stronger than you think, and justice will be yours if you hold firm. Trust your strength, my love. Justice will be yours. I pressed the letter to my heart, tears streaming down my cheeks. He had seen it all, the storm that was coming, the betrayal that would cut deepest, and yet he had trusted me to weather it. For the first time since his passing, I felt peace, not because I had won, but because I knew Victor believed in me. He had given me the tools, the strength, and the foresight to face even our daughter's cruelty. Rebecca's downfall spread quickly through the town. Once, she had boasted about her wealth at luncheons, hosted lavish dinners where she paraded jewelry like trophies. Now the same people whispered about her arrogance, her lies, her debts. At the cafe, I overheard two women murmur she thought she was untouchable. Poor Olivia, imagine being treated like that in mourning. The sympathy was mine now. The community, once hesitant, began to circle back with warmth. Neighbors arrived with casseroles and flowers, not out of pity but respect. They saw not a broken widow, but a woman who had endured cruelty with dignity and emerged stronger. Rebecca, meanwhile, became a shadow in town, avoiding familiar places, her once bright presence dimmed by shame. The friends who had cheered her recklessness no longer answered her calls. When people did see her, they shook their heads, not with malice but disappointment. I reclaimed my home slowly, one corner at a time. I restored Victor's armchair to its rightful place by the fire. I hung our wedding photo back on the wall, the one Rebecca had hidden away. The garden, once neglected, bloomed again under my hands. Roses returned to their full glory, lilies stretched toward the sun. On Sundays, the house filled again, not with Rebecca's cold grandeur, but with warmth. Old friends, cousins, even neighbors gathered at my table. We shared roast chicken, laughter, and stories of Victor. For the first time in months, the house echoed with life, not tension. Arthur often joined, sitting at the end of the table with his quiet smile. He never took credit for his role, though we all knew I could not have done it without him. Bittersweet moments lingered. At night, I sometimes wandered into Rebecca's old room. The posters of her teenage years still clung to the walls, faded but stubborn. I'd sit on her bed, remembering the girl who used to run into my arms after school, clutching her report cards, begging for praise. I mourned her, not the woman who had betrayed me, but the daughter I once had. The daughter Victor and I had loved so fiercely. Justice had come, but justice is never without cost. Yet, dignity was mine again. No one could strip that from me. Not Rebecca's cruelty, not whispered rumors, not even the loneliness of widowhood. I had faced betrayal and grief, and I had stood firm. One evening, sitting by the fire with Victor's letter in my hands, I whispered aloud, "You were right, my love. Justice is mine." And though it cost me our daughter, it gave me back myself. The flames flickered as if in answer. I leaned back in his chair, the house peaceful, the garden quiet outside. Rebecca's choices were hers to carry now. Mine was to live, to honor Victor, and to hold my head high. And in that silence I realized this was not just the end of a battle, it was the beginning of a life reclaimed. Betrayal hurts in many forms, but nothing cuts deeper than when it comes from your own child. I had always believed that family could withstand anything, grief, hardship, even the lure of wealth. But I was wrong. What happened after Victor's death showed me how fragile the bond can be when tested by greed. Money does not change character, it reveals it. Rebecca's hunger for power stripped away every layer of love I thought was unshakable. She showed me not the daughter I raised, but the woman she had chosen to become. I lost my husband, and in many ways I lost my daughter too. That grief lingers like a shadow, yet through it all, I discovered something I had long underestimated: my own strength. Victor prepared the path, but it was I who had to walk it, step by step, through tears and humiliation, until dignity was restored. Justice is not about revenge. Justice is about truth. And the truth was this: love cannot be forced, respect cannot be bought, and dignity will always outlast greed. I sit now in the home Victor and I built together, with his words still close to my heart. "Ali, trust your strength, justice will be yours." He gave me justice, yes, but I had to find the courage to claim it. Now I leave you with one question. If you stood where I stood, cast out by your own child, would you have had the strength to fight?